Chargers giving up 291 passing yards. It's the worst in the league. Got to fire back if you're the reporter. Bro, would a new coach fix the Chargers?
Yes. I'm not saying they'd win the Super Bowl, but I think they definitely would be a better team, and I think they'd be a playoff team, like a perennial playoff team. Look, you guys know I was saying Staley should have been gone maybe after that playoff game last year where they blew the big lead at halftime to the Jaguars, or during the season, even after a win, because I saw this coming, right? It was a win. I said I still would have got rid of him. Now they're 4-6. And here's the thing. He's a defensive guy, right? Their defense was a top 10 defense the 3 previous years before he got there. Since he's been there, they've been a bottom 10 defense. Are you telling me Derwin James is washed? He's only 27 years old. Okay, are you telling me Khalil Mack, who has 11 sacks this year, is
6
washed?
in 1 game.
Are you? Oh, okay, but still, are you telling me Joey Bosa, who's 28 years old, is washed? At 28, he's washed? I'm just saying, like, this defense should not be this bad. I get it yesterday, the defense wasn't really the problem. They only gave up, 23 points. But overall,
just for the
it's
record,
been a mess.
Jordan Love threw for 322.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. There you go, against that defense. But the points but I think Austin Eckler's made comments, Keenan Allen's made tweets, and now you had somebody yesterday saying something's got to change. We can't go on like this. Like, they're a mess, and I don't know if he's going to make it through the season, but, yeah, they'd be better off with a different coach.
You ever notice that no coaches ever make the Bud list? Because they're never going to be encouraged. Bruce is like the grim reaper of coaches. And look, I understand where you're coming from, and there's a lot of merit to what you're saying, especially when that's your specialty defense, and you're calling the defense and things aren't going very well. But when you look at the Chargers organization, you got to wonder how much of the dysfunction is purely coaching and how much of the dysfunction is organizational. And there's a lot of owners in that organization. There's a lot of people involved in different aspects of the team. Who's got say on free agency, on the draft, on game decisions. There's a lot of cooks in that kitchen. Now, typically when you get a guy like Justin Herbert, if he's really the guy, those guys can overcome dysfunction in the organization. For a lot of years, people thought that the Cincinnati Bengals were dysfunctional, and Joe Burrow has come in there and changed that whole perception.
Until their dysfunction got him injured twice.
Is Herbert the guy? That's a question. How much of it is organizational dysfunction? But I would say, from a head coaching perspective, they're going to ask you tough questions. And when you start saying stuff like, I don't talk to the fan base, I talk to the player, it's not good. Right. And when you get frustrated in front of the media, it's not good. You ask for poise from all your players. You need to show that same poise, even if you're unhappy with what they're asking. That's their job.
Listen, I don't know what it would have been the last 3 years when they had this allegedly stacked roster and Herbert was still cheap if they had a better coach. I know what it's going to be the next few years, which is going to look a lot like the Chargers have looked the last decade. They're going to work
with a better coach?
Yeah, they're not a coach away. Like, Mike Williams is done, right, for the year, and then he's not going to be on the team probably next year. Keenan Allen's their best offensive player than Herbert. He is going to be one of the older number 1 receivers in football next year. Eckler is going to be out the door. Khalil Mack has, after last year underachieving, this year, like to your point, played better. But Joey Bosa had 2.5 sacks, and now was on the cart. It seemingly his season's over. The J.C. Jackson thing was a miss. Derwin James, a player I've loved but has underachieved this year. Yeah. And they put a lot towards this little mini era. And so I think next year, pick the coach. You give him whatever coach you want. This is not a playoff team next year. Wow. Everybody keeps talking about how talented and how good the Chargers are. And every year they win 9 games or they win 8 games. Like, this is what it's been since Phillip Rivers won 12 games 4 years in a row 15 years ago, and since then it's been this.
I hear you, but I'm not saying they'll win the AFC, but I think with Justin Herbert, and I don't know if he's got, I've said this on this show, I don't know if he's got what Joe Burrow has as far as the intangibles to lead a team, but I do think he's a very good quarterback.
Usually great quarterbacks
can overcome.
Yeah, and we got to go because we're about to talk about one of them.
We got to talk about, we're talking about the Prince next.
That's what the guy who came back on Herbert. The whole reason we're talking about Staley being on the hot seat, because the Prince embarrassed him.
I wonder why.
Had they won a playoff game last year, we wouldn't be talking about it. The Prince ending careers.
Staley's got to go, probably. Coming up tomorrow, it's Mahomes Mountain. We'll find out tonight if there's a change at the top. Dun, dun, dun. Check in on the Prince. The Prince was number 2 on the Bud list. So how much credit do you deserve?
But that's not the question.
Great.
That is
That
the
is
question.
not the question we
That
agreed
is the
upon.
question.
Changed it.
We
That is
agreed
the
on
question. Can we see last week's blood list? Can we see last week's blood list?
The betrayal.
I don't like to brag about the motivational
That
powers, the
is
inspirational force of the bud list. But DTR number 3, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, gets his first win of his career. Crying, he was so inspired by the bud list.
Unbelievable.
Josh
Yeah,
Allen,
see.
let's go Josh Allen.
That's not
we
the
just
question.
talked about what he did.
Such a
Man,
big
highest
segment.
passer rating since week 4, coach.
Great job,
Scores the
Bruce.
most points the Jets have given up this week. And now Trevor in the, hold on, Nick, listen to this. Trevor, highest passer rating of the season.
Nailed it.
Unbelievable.
First 2 rushing touchdowns of the year.
Wow.
First game he has more than 2 total touchdowns.
That was-
this season.
Crush it.
Trevor,
Bro,
see,
I
it's
don't-
about connecting with the players.
Don't.
Trevor doesn't need the fancy nickname. He doesn't need the bugles and the
can I-
horns and the
Good
flute.
job, Brew.
He just needs tough love, coach. That's what I'm about.
Okay.
Old school, tough
Okay.
love,
Don't-
and he gets it
Don't
done.
take those
I'm not even mad at
sunglasses
you.
off. You earned them.
You said
Coach.
on
Thank
the
you.
air
On the air?
2 weeks ago when I was attacking you for your rampant flip-flopping. You said, and I quote, well, sometimes, I just don't want it to be 3-on-1 or 2-on-1.
Yeah, it's
so
the
whatever.
chemistry. Yeah.
You set this whole thing up. The question on this sheet is, Brew, do you owe the Prince an apology?
Yeah.
And you
We changed.
You
You knew it
changed
wasn't a good question.
Okay. Well, you know what? Luckily, Brew.
You should be
Brew,
thanking me too.
you-
How have Nick's picks done since they were on the bud list?
I mean,
like 4-1 or
All
something
right,
like that.
But that's not the
Good
point.
job, Brew.
Here's
Thank
the
you,
thing.
coaches.
What's fair for the goose is
Thank you.
fair for the
Ungrateful.
gander, I
Yep.
think is what they say.
Good for the goose.
Good for the
Sure. I participate in a little dirty pool myself.
Here we go.
Because you guys know I'm very popular in Jacksonville, in the greater Duval
That's true.
County.
Those tequila bottles.
I paid for a tailgate, the local media. So I had Hubs create a little sizzle reel of Brew's antagonizing comments to Trevor. And they played it for him at his press conference.
Out of town.
Well, let's play the video and go ahead. He responds to you, Brew. Play it, please,
Fall over
Hubs.
him like you, but he looks like right now he's just game managing. Here's the thing, though, Trevor, you didn't ask for this, all right? You didn't ask for the Bugle Boys. You didn't ask for the nickname, the Prince that was promised. You didn't ask for the royal music that is playing right now, and not really a good season. He's kind of the weak link right now.
So that
Oh, tough love, Trevor. You
That was-
responded,
All right,
baby.
Brew, just so you know, I lied to you there. That was actually him talking about Arden Key and others saying he's a one-read quarterback. But it's not the point. Here's the thing, Coach. Right now, if the playoff standings were to hold, who are the AFC is the stat conference. The conference with all the great quarterbacks, all of it. Who are the only quarterbacks who would have started back-to-back playoff games? The King and the Prince. That's it. Of Hall, this great quarterback conference I got to hear about.
Well,
and
Lamar
Trevor's a
was
game
hurt.
manager. Right. It's a very simple question. Who's the only, right now, if the standings hold, who's the only quarterback that when the playoffs start was like, oh, I was here last year? The King and the Prince.
Josh,
That's it.
you got Josh out right now.
Well, if the standings hold, then
Josh.
now you're a Bills guy? All
No,
of a
I'm just
sudden?
facts.
They're
Josh
looking
will
like
get-
they're gonna-
Josh
Coach, come on. He had a bad game. He
Tua-
turned around 4
Tua was
touchdowns.
hurt. Tua
He had
was
guys
hurt.
calling him. Yeah,
He could
the
win a
King
game.
and the Prince.
He could- Prince
The
could win
King
a
and the
game.
Prince.
A lot of
Go ahead.
finagling in that.
There's no finagling. It's a very straightforward question.
So I think the reason Brew doesn't owe an apology, or I know that ends up not being the question, but the reason that I think
He throws in.
you're justified in the way that you're thinking is because of what he was actually responding to. So Nick Bosa talked about him, saying he's a one-read quarterback, and then Arden Key talked about the fact they had to make him go through his reads when he was in Jacksonville. Arden, he played together and he was hurt, that he has a nice relationship with Arden, that he would say that. But what I can tell you is those guys aren't grinding the all-22 like Wildes and coming up with that scouting report on their own. That's coming from defensive coordinators who are talking about this is what we need to do to beat him. So that's the line on him now. That's the way that people think about him. So until he consistently proves that he can go through his read progression, that's going to be the stumbling block, and that's going to be the limiting factor because that's not an accident that multiple players from multiple teams are saying that. That's coming from the defensive coordinator.
Coming up next, D'Amico Ryans. Okay, so how that's going to play out.
Big game.
Another loss against the Texans?
Maybe I'll put him on the bud list.
I wouldn't.
It depends. Do I want to help him or CJ?
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.